I'm going to show you something now that is an extremely bizarre thing. It starts like this. Here is a indication of cross sections of the brain. So you can see on the right where the slices are, and on the left what that slice looks like in an MRI when you're looking at a cross-sectional slice of the brain. At the top of the brain, you see it's just the cerebrum, the hemispheres. And then as you get down a little farther, there's the beginning of the corpus callosum. So yeah, we're just starting to slice into the corpus callosum. Then down a little farther, and the corpus callosum and the ventricles have that butterfly shape. That's the butterfly from the MK Ultra program. There's the architectural feature on the doors of the Egyptian temple. Okay, so now we start to get into the eyeballs here somewhere. So this is really interesting. Pay attention to this thing. That's going to be significant. So anyway, we work our way down the brain. There's where the spinal column is, and the medulla oblongata. Those are the fused legs looking at it from underneath. So the animation looks like this. Super cool. What an inspired animator. Check this out. Boom. The Baphomet. The much villainized. People say this is Satan. People say this is Masonic. It is the emblem of the Church of Satan. It is interesting that a bunch of occultists erected a statue of Baphomet as a statement of it's the right of occultists to freedom of religious expression. Anyway, here's a cool thing. So as we go down the cross sections of the brain, we start seeing something really interesting. Come on. So as we get to this certain level, we start to notice some things. So first of all, these are what are these called, Brad?
The
cerebellum? Cerebrum. So let's just notice a couple of things here. The knees, the extended, or the folded knees, and the big bulbous mass here, this whatever mass of the knees, and the cerebrum. Now it starts getting more interesting. See the wings. See this spout here. I wanted to, in the Ishtar statue, by the way, she has a little church, or a little, it looks like a rook in the chess game, coming out of the top of her head that we see here. This spout coming off of Baphomet, and then this flame up above, is almost identical to what Ishtar had in her statue that had that little spout coming off the top. We see the caduceus coming out of the pants. We see this thing that doesn't really have any symbolic significance, but wait till we see some comparisons here. Then we see the breasts. It's a strange androgynous character, so it's I don't know, it's male seemingly, but also with breasts. So people say it's the androgyne. We have these wings, of course, and then the hands pointing up and down. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's the pituitary, and this is where the pineal gland is. But anyway, we're going to go through these cross sections and compare these images, and there is some remarkable things that would seem to indicate that this thing. So first of all, look at that. Look at the flame. Look at the septum, the wings corresponding to the wings, and the knees, of course. The knees exactly correspond to the cerebrum. But this is really interesting. Look at this little section here, this little round section. And this is either the spinal cord or the medulla oblongata, but look at how it perfectly, wow, look at that. I mean, that's just scary. And then this thing, this mass, do you know what that is, Brad? I actually have labels for these. I'll super these in.
No, but even like when you sent this to me, I feel like Vinise maybe sent this to me a while ago, and I get people sending me stuff too because they've seen stuff and they go, I found something too, and you look at it and you're like, no, there's nothing there.
Like nonsense.
And then I think one of you guys sent me this, and I probably glossed over it because of the Baphomet image. I was just like, oh, all right, now it's, and then I think you sent it to me again, and there was a moment where it was so much in his crossed legs, but there's a cistern right in between the cerebellum. If you look at Baphomet's legs, the way that the folds go down, there's a
Yeah.
cistern
Yep.
right there too. And
I'm working off a kind of small image here. It's a shame. I'll find better,
but
a
that
tighter
art,
picture of this. But this stuff, exactly, this interesting mass here, this cistern, there's a lot of detail there, and there's some moments of resemblance.
but even the cerebellum, because of the way that it has kind of those stripes, the folds in the cloth covering his legs is
Oh, right.
similar. But that weird little circular rainbow
This
mid
thing, like, there's nobody ever talks about the symbolism of that. Like, I
that
don't even know what that is.
in that
Everybody's got a,
it's in that white section in those MRI scans. You see that circular shape right over the cerebellum, and like I remember looking at this, and the more I looked at it, I was like, man, in the same way that a snowman is, not representative of a person, there's enough of the compositional shapes of this
yeah.
thing.
I mean, look at that. Look at that. So first of all, this aperture here, which is either the cerebellum or the place where the spinal column goes, and then this dome, this hood, there's an actual name. I have the label here somewhere. I'll find the label and put it on. But look at that. Look at that matchup. I mean, that's eerie.
The medulla is in the middle there, so.
Oh, that's it. That's the medulla. Yeah. So the indication of these things, which is interesting because it's the Ida and Pingala, which is probably wrapping up around here. So the depth and the amazing layers of amazingness of this symbol are much more apparent now. But this thing, that's just freaky. And then the dome over the top, like you said. I mean,
but I think if you go through some of the slices, if you pull off the Baphomet off the brain again.
okay.
If you look where that circle is around the caduceus, where the first crossing of the two serpents, there's a circle in the middle.
Right.
In some of the slices, if you go through, there's kind of a shape that's similar to that, right where it is. There's a white gap, two white lines with a dark space in between it. I don't know if it's in the same MRI scan, but I think that the hard part too.
Yeah, look at that.
The hard part about this image is it's one of those things that I refer to as scarecrow symbology. The guy who made this image of Baphomet, Eliphas
Levi. Yep. Levy.
He never meant it as the devil. It wasn't ever, he didn't draw it as a demon, as a devil figure. I think it was A.E. Waite or something. He made like a tarot deck, and he was the one who took Eliphas's, I think I say his name, Eliphas. He took that image and put the devil underneath it for a tarot card. So it then ever became associated with this idea. And the idea too, even that, like, we're talking about the absurd notion to believe that Poseidon is a old man who's ripped and muscular. This ripped muscular old man is really just an anthropomorphized symbol for the principle of the aspect of the oceans of the earth and how they move and all their principles and all their life and all that stuff. The symbol of Baphomet is as known as the satanic idea, the notion that people think that there's actually a goat demon person, and that's what this is representative of, to me, is exactly a scarecrow symbology. I mean, if you think about like the Knights Templar, they were supposed to have worshipped Baphomet, but they had a statue that had two faces to it. That the Knights Templar Baphomet was a two-headed statue. That's not a goat. That's not this sort of image. But it's if you look at this symbol, I mean, given the guy who made this thing, he really knew what he was doing, because if you understand that symbol for what it is, that it's not symbolic of some sort of magical goat demon, but it's basically telling you this story that is being told over and over again, that if you give into your lower devices, if you give into your lower animal nature, that's why he has hooves, his lower half is animal. If you give into that, you go down, right? You go down towards the vice and towards the dark moon. But if you give in,
this is relating to the upward and downward hands.
Yes. Also. Well, in the image that you have, you've inverted it, but like that image of the moon is at the top is white, and the one at the bottom is dark. And it's virtue and vice. It's the same story of all the sheep. Sheep go to heaven, the goats go to hell. It's the churning of the ocean.
Wow.
the churning of the ocean of milk with the Devas on one side and the Asuras on the other side. The story, you talk about there being, you know, 3 basic templates for stories of man versus man, man versus self, man versus nature. The story that comes up throughout all of our stories over and over again is good versus evil and vice versus virtue. And every single one of these stories is every villain and every protagonist, every movie is the demons inside of you, and every hero is the good side of you in all these stories. And this symbol has nothing to do with Satan or some sort of idea of an evil goat or a demon. It's basically showing you that idea that this thing that human beings are made of, we can either give into good and be virtuous, or we can give into our temptations and be evil. And maybe that giving into your temptations is you drink too much or something like that, or maybe your temptations is you're a sociopath and you kill people and you murder people. Those are all still those temptations that you're giving into. Like, you know, temptations are, there's a broad spectrum. For myself, I give into eating cookies and chocolate, you know, a lot of times. For some people, it's corporate greed and they're willing to start wars and to
I have the murder thing.
But anyways, like I said, unfortunately this symbol is so freaking loaded with and like I said, there's scarecrow symbology where you take a symbol that has actual knowledge and wisdom and benefit to it and you make it seem evil. Is basically trying to tell people to keep out. We don't want you to know about this symbol, so we're going to make it scary and make you think that it's representative of all the boogeymen and all these scary things. And so some people might say, some people will certainly say that this is a stretch, that they can't see this in this image, and they're going to say it's ridiculous. But there
Look at the wings. Look at those wings.
It's the cerebellum and the cistern in between the cerebellum and his cross legs. It's very similar. It's that rainbow arch shape at the middle, and even the androgynous thing. That androgynous thing is another sort of
the breasts. Yeah, the breasts seem to indicate. I mean, the breasts certainly match up to something.
Well, but even that idea of the androgen and stuff like that, and people will fool it.
But I mean, they also seem to indicate like a biological. I wonder what that is. I'll look that up with those actual lobes. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Modern people these days take this idea of an androgen and immediately wrap it in modern day like gender politics and identity politics and talk about like, oh, this is what they're trying to do. They want you to be and, you know, change it. But really the whole idea of the androgen, again, if not taken literally, is this idea of balance, of the negative and the positive, of the masculine and the feminine. And that idea of a hermaphrodite or an androgen is a symbol showing that a person is in complete balance, that the yin yang is in union. You know, there's the light and the dark, and not that femininity is negative and masculinity is positive. But if you think about masculinity as far as a phallus, that is something that projects outward, and femininity is negative space. It is a receptacle. So we're not talking about negative in the terms of bad. We're talking about negative, and like the negative side of a battery isn't bad or evil. Negative side of
like yin is gravity or condensation. Yang is expansiveness or radiating outward. So you can say one's positive and one's negative, but what it really means is projecting or pulling in, whatever that word is. There's another thing here that's interesting, a much more biological, like actual biological schematic, because a lot of these are really quite operational schematics. The sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. In fact, the way that, see, there's a white snake and a black snake. These are symbolically represent the Ida and Pingala. And it was only when I started studying Adrian Snodgrass and his Eastern symbolism that I really got an appreciation for the Ida. I forget which is which, but the Ida is like your parasympathetic nervous system, and it's that flow of energy that goes up. It's the inhaling of breath, so you know how your lungs fill from the bottom up, and then the Pingala is the exhale of breath, so it's the descending. So so it's the parasympathetic, it's the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system that these two, the marriage of male and female, are also. You know, like your blood is red on one side and blue on the other side. There's ascending or moving away from the heart and then a return on the other side. Your nervous system, one amps you up to recover from things and one brings you down again. So people who take a lot of amphetamines can't calm down afterwards. Their parasympathetic system is blocked. And so another aspect, I mean, and certainly symbols work on a number of layers. So the idea of the higher calling and the lower nature is absolutely valid, but also the upward working, activating system of the sympathetic system and the downward flowing, relaxing system of the parasympathetic nervous system, and then the marriage of the two. And did you notice? Here's an interesting thing. It has to do with whirling dervishes. Your pineal gland is in the exact center of your head, and the exact center at the what's it called? The rotational axis of your head is the pineal gland. And look at here, this ball at the top, which actually represents the pineal gland in the caduceus symbol. I thought that was brilliant. How this
Well, I think, I mean,
absolutely corresponds to where the pineal gland would be.
and to your point about coming and going and up and down, like that's also such, again, this again, you said you could have man versus man, man versus self, man versus nature, but if you want to boil that down even further, every story is about up or down.
Wow.
You're either being, brought up to the hero, or you're being knocked down and you have to pull yourselves up. And the hero's journey is he goes through the trials and tribulations and fails, and then he has to rise up to the occasion. And think about all the times we describe up is always associated with good, and down is always associated with negative. You're down in the dumps, you have to pull yourself up. Every up is always positive and down is always negative. And I think in medical terms, there's afferent, efferent. I don't remember which means which, but that means fluid coming and versus fluid going. And that's another such a huge component, I think, to all of this idea of fluids that are rising up to the brain, and then the brain is then descending that fluid also. So those ideas of ascension and descension are such, and again, we could probably make like a list of themes and motifs that you could just boil down to, like, instead of like the hero with 1,000 faces, it could be basically this story that's told again and again.
It's the nature of symbolism that it resonates on. They say most symbols work on at least 6 levels. And what we've demonstrated is there's a biological component to all of these archetypes, the struggles, good versus, the winged lion chained to the earthbound lion, Horus and Set, the eternally paired adversaries. It's a brilliant point.
I'm a Pisces. It's 2 fish with their tails tied together. One swims up and one swims down.
Wow.
And like that I associate the idea of Pisces being prone to be addicts. If that fish that swims down is a stronger swimmer, he's going to pull that other fish trying to swim up down with
Wow.
it. And the thing about the Baphomet thing too, like I said, so many people will get so triggered by that and start thinking about these cliches of, like I said, of goat men, which I never understood, because to me, goats are adorable. They're not terrifying even remotely. But if you start to understand that idea of sheeps go to heaven and goats go to hell, it's that Randy Pan, the goat man, the guy who's given to all his temptations and doing all that stuff. The goat go to heaven, the sheep, the pure, or the goats go to hell, the sheep and the pure go to heaven. I think you could make this, you could write a thesis on that idea. If why would somebody draw Baphomet and have it associate to brain anatomy, is you could make these bigger symbolic ideas that inside each one of our brains dwell these gods and these devils. And we talk about people that lose the battle with their demons, and I think you can make those symbols all of a sudden have so much more meaning, instead of associating with these just juvenile ideas that these are representations of magical, like, creatures and these deities that exist in these fantasy realms, and they're coming for your soul. I mean, it's really what is coming for your soul is all your own demons, it's your own temptations and that sort of thing. You want to wallow and have a cocaine problem or a heroin addiction or something like that, then that's your decision to do that stuff. There's no evil outside of you that's doing it. Those are your demons. So I think that idea of, once that we showed me that Baphomet thing, and I was like, man, there are some correspondences here. There are some stuff that it does look like it's similar shapes. It makes me think about that idea of Michelangelo's brain. God is in the brain. All of these things are in the mind of man, and it's making this amazing masterwork of artwork to say, I've made this image of a character, but it's representative of basically what the human experience is in this tug of war that happens inside all of us, of good and evil, of vice and virtue, of being a good person or giving into our temptation. And you can do it in a single symbol. Like you said, you could cheat and go with a picture of Khnum, that symbol of Baphomet is so loaded and so many layers with so much information. And I try and do this all the time when I make posters. I try and encode information into single images and tell a story on multiple levels. So when I see people who are really versed in layering symbolism in a singular image, the way that logo design is basically that, you're just trying to put a bunch of, load a bunch of ideas about somebody's mission statement about their company into a single logo. You can, if your brain is wired that way to understand how to make images tell multiple layered stories, you can look at these things and be like, wow, that's such a much more fascinating image now, and it's not some scary thing that you should run away from and think it's representative of this weird world that people think we live in with like Tolkien demons and hooved beings, and winged characters and stuff like that. And once you start understanding it for the intelligent, didactic work of art it is, it becomes fascinating and it's so much more interesting.
Well said. All right, so have you seen the Ganesha thing, by the way? Ganesha, exactly the same. The view from underneath the brain with the cerebrum and the medulla makes absolute Ganesha.
I have a little Ganesh. He sits on my desk.
Wow, that's awesome.
He holds a pinball.
That's hilarious. All right, so this has been the remarkable Brad Clausen. If you want to look at the documentary that resulted from our research project, it's the Magical Egypt series. I'm sure we'll print what the website is for that. Brad, let's keep doing these and we'll continue bringing this artwork to light. We're going to be continuing to hammer away at this thing. We're getting it out through artistic channels and through channels where people are more sympathetic to these ideas. I don't think we're ever going to get official acknowledgement from Egyptology about what an important discovery this is, but I think this is on par with Champollion's work with the Rosetta Stone and the deciphering of the hieroglyphs. I think this is a paradigm-busting discovery of genuine importance.
Well, and if nothing else, I mean, for the folks of like the Zahis of the world, talk about calling white people pyramid idiots, this makes the Egyptians even smarter. It just adds to their legacy and says they were brilliant. They knew about consciousness. They knew about the brain. Why would you not want them to know that? Why would you not want? Why would you?
And their science was an inverse. The one thing our science will not address or cannot explain is the one thing that they were uniquely focused on. It's like science has gone through an absolute inversion.
Yeah, so if you want to add glory to Egypt and the past of the Egyptians, Zahi should embrace the notion that they were brilliant, intelligent people.
It'd be good for tourism. It seems like it'd be good for tourism.
Wow,
anyway, if you're an art professor, if you're a symbolist, if you are anybody who has some authority in the ancient use of imagery and symbolism, please contact us. We're assembling another volley of shows and arguments and trying to get this out to the world to get recognition, not for us, but to set history right so we understand about ourselves. This might be the most important intellectual birthright that we could possibly have, and our inheritance has been stolen from us like a Christmas present that was held up at the post office. That this might be the long lost owner's manual to the human psyche, and because of the denial and suppression of gatekeepers and ne'er-do-wells, I try and get that word ne'er-do-well in once every podcast, we are being robbed of our identity and our heritage and our history and a completely different view of who we are and where we come from, and of course the importance of consciousness.
Yeah, and to me, that, like I said, the like you were just saying, I mean, it's the idea of it relating to consciousness and states of knowing would be instantly applicable to our lack of knowing.
It's how we participate in divinity. It's the only thing divine about us is consciousness.
No, my theory is that this would immediately benefit human beings in our understanding of consciousness and would propel us significantly further forward in understanding how our brains work, because and now that understanding how to incubate these states of knowing and incubate epiphany and that sort of thing. And why would anybody be opposed to that?
Right. All right. Well, I could continue for another couple hours, but I have to pee and I forgot my podcasting bucket. All right, my friend, I'll talk to you soon. MagicalEgypt.com, folks.
just inget mar ser pa wist ved de likhet så snill det då det